All right, good evening, families. My name is Heather Deere, and I'm the Assistant Director of Parent and Family Programs. Thank you so much for joining us for our third installment of the Spring Parent and Family webinar series. Before we get started, thank you for joining our session today on exploring the summer session. We have the Associate Director of Academic Advising with us, Shelly Laurenzo, and we're going to talk about some specifics related to registering for summer courses, tuition, a little sprinkle of financial aid information, and some of the expanded course offerings that are available during these summer sessions. Now, before we do get started, I want to give a caveat to our conversation this evening, and that you may have seen the email I forwarded to families this afternoon about changes to the summer session and whether it would be remote or in person, and a preview of fall. We received that information the same time that you did, so there may be some questions that you have that we are not able to answer this evening on our call. We will be able to point you in the right direction in terms of who would be best to answer those questions and where you can begin to reach out. But I do want to be upfront and honest with you that if we don't have the answer to your question this evening, we will do our best to point you in the right direction. So we will go ahead and get started. And thank you again, Shelly, for being with me. We are going to start with some specifics about summer session dates. So summer session 1 is going to start June 1st and last until July 2nd. Summer session 2 is July 6th through August 6th. And we have a unique session 3, which is June 1 through August 6th. This is a little bit different, that it's lasting the duration of the 2 summer sessions. So that's something that's a little bit different this year that your student may not have experienced before, and is something to explore for sure. So those are some specifics about dates. We learned today that summer course delivery will be fully remote with the exception of a few in-person programs in graduate and professional programs that do not require on-campus housing, as our on-campus housing facilities will not be open this summer and our dining facilities will not be open this summer. If you're looking for some more specific information on the reasons why summer housing is not available and dining is not available, I would encourage you to look at the Path Forward website and also reference that email that I shared with you earlier this afternoon. We can try and answer some questions about that if possible at the end of our session. So when thinking about summer course delivery, that essentially means that the courses are going to be synchronous or asynchronous remote courses, so either in real time or available for on-demand viewing or participation. And your students have learned a lot over the last couple semesters about what really works well for them and their time management and how they learn and what is best for their academic needs. And so that's something to take into consideration when they're planning for any of the summer coursework that they might be interested in. And here's that sprinkle of tuition and financial aid information that I shared. I'm breezing through this because Shelly has some great information about the expanded course offerings, and we will take a lot of your questions at the end. And so thinking about tuition, summer 2021 e-bill statements are going to be distributed monthly with the following due dates: June 1st, July 1st, and August 1st, 2021. And here's an overview of in-state and out-of-state per credit hour information. You can also find all of this information on the William & Mary website, and I will link appropriately as we are answering some of these questions. When it comes to financial aid, summer aid eligibility is going to be based on the FAFSA for this current year. And if you or your student has questions about their financial aid eligibility, I would highly, highly recommend that they reach out to their financial aid counselor to walk them through some of those aid options. And you can also email aid@wm.edu or contact the financial aid office with this phone number. And so that would be the best way to get some answers to your questions about your student's specific financial aid situation and package and that availability for them over the summer. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Shelly to talk about some of the meat to my potatoes.
Thanks, Heather. So one of the things that we're excited about for this summer, some of our expanded summer course offerings. So courselist.wm.edu is the quickest and easiest way to check our course listings that are available. One of the things that's new for this summer is that we are offering a COLL 100 and 2 COLL 150s in the summer. Typically, those are just offered during the fall and spring semesters, but we are offering one section of COLL 100 and 2 sections of the COLL 150 for students to take this summer. One of the things that's nice about that expanded kind of summer session offering that Heather was talking about earlier, where we have a course that can take place over both summer session 1 and the summer session 2 dates, is it allows students to spend more time kind of in the course, working through it over that longer period of time. I also like to highlight for students and families the foreign language course offerings. In particular, for some students, foreign language can be really challenging to learn. And so by taking it in the summer, it allows them to have that focus on just that one course at a time. So foreign language courses are also available in the summer for some select languages. And then we also have, I think total will end up being over 15 COLL 300 offerings available this summer. So we know a lot of families are trying to figure out, families and students are trying to figure out what their students' plans look like based off of how the previous academic year went for them, and thinking ahead to the next academic year. So really just want to make sure students and families are aware that there are a lot of offerings available this summer for students, and to really think about, what makes the most sense to take in a summer session. Kind of like Heather was saying earlier, at this point, our students have a good feel for what remote looks like, what remote asynchronous versus remote synchronous looks like for them. And so using that data that they've kind of collected over this past calendar year, with adjustments to our instructional modalities, taking that into consideration when determining what types of courses would be best for them to take in the summer, understanding that remote modality. Kind of some of the nuts and bolts. So registration for summer courses starts on Monday. The other thing that's important for folks to know, especially for families of our first year students, typically for the fall and spring semester, you probably heard your students talk about needing a PIN to register. And for the summer session courses, students do not need a PIN to register for these classes. But registration does begin March 22nd.
Okay, now that was quick, because we wanted to leave a lot of time for some Q&A. So now is the time to submit your questions either via the Q&A function here in Zoom or in the chat, and we will do our best to answer as many questions as we're able to. What time does registration begin? I know that can be specific sometimes.
It begins at 8 a.m. Eastern time.
Great question. Students do typically have a very specific time in which they are ready to go. Mm-hmm. Will advisors schedule meeting times with freshmen to discuss their courses in the summer?
Great question. So we are approaching our advising period where advisors meet with students to talk about their fall schedule, but that's also a great time to talk about summer as well. So there's, no need for a student to wait to talk about fall when they could talk to their advisor right now about summer and fall. So just because the registration starts on March 22nd doesn't mean that that's the end all be all for that registration window. That's just the earliest students can do that. So I would encourage students to meet with their advisors if they have questions or concerns, or if they're kind of thinking maybe between a couple different course offerings. I would encourage students to meet with their advisors, and students are always welcome to meet with the professional advisors in the Office of Academic Advising. So in academic advising, we have 3 full-time professional advisors who are available to meet with students. So that's always a good option too, in case, maybe their faculty member is not available for, maybe their schedules aren't syncing up right away, that they can squeeze in an appointment with us sooner. So we're also available to help students if they have some questions about registration.
Wonderful. Okay, so I do have a question here. Is the 2-month summer session the same length as a full fall or spring semester, or is it shorter? So Shelly, maybe could you touch on the 10-week session and how that maybe differs from a regular semester?
Sure. Yeah. So, so one of the things that our faculty have been thinking about when thinking about summer session offerings is, while it can be helpful to have maybe a singular focus on one class, that level of intensity can be really challenging, and the more traditional condensed summer session models where we have summer session 1 and summer session 2. For some folks, right, every subject is different. Every student's kind of different in terms of how they approach the materials at hand. So one of the things they decided to do was to then have an option that does stretch over the 10 weeks for students to be able to participate in. The other nice thing about having a summer session course that stretches over the 10-week period is that does allow for a little bit more freedom and flexibility in a student's schedule. So for example, if a student is also working, has an internship, doing research, whatever that looks like, that 10-week schedule could be more flexible with them. But I will say it does depend on the class, right? So not all classes are offered during the full 10 weeks. So when a student is looking at the classes, they also want to make sure they check what are the specific dates for the class, because not every class is offered in every session offering.
Gotcha. So I have a couple questions here I'm going to move through kind of quickly. Is on-campus housing available for face-to-face courses? No, on-campus housing will not be available for students this summer, and dining services will not operate this summer at William and Mary. You can learn more information about that in the email that was sent to all families earlier this afternoon, and also on the Path Forward website. You can learn more about that information. And is financial aid available for summer tuition? Yes, it is. Definitely recommend that your student reach out to their financial aid counselor to learn more about what is available to them specifically in relation to summer courses. And I'm seeing some questions here kind of along the same line. How many classes can students sign up for during the summer, and how many do we recommend? So what does a typical course load look like in the summer?
Sure. So because of the timing of the courses, when we have summer session 1 and summer session 2, we typically recommend a student just takes one course per summer session, because again, you're moving at a really fast clip. And so we want students to have the brain power to kind of stay on top of everything. So students can register for 2 courses per 5-week session, which would end up being, depending on the number of credits, could be 8 credits per summer session. But ideally, we really want students to at max take 1 per session, just from an advising standpoint because of the load. But again, students know themselves and might feel more comfortable doing 2 courses per session. But in general, from an advising standpoint, we just recommend 1 per session.
Fantastic. I'm seeing a few questions here that maybe on the course list, there are still some face-to-face classes being offered. Do we anticipate that those will change to remote, or is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So like Heather mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, we just found out this afternoon that things were changing to an all remote summer session. And so the registrar's office is now working behind the scenes to update the modalities. So all summer courses for undergrads will be remote asynchronous or remote synchronous. So I think just it should be rectified in the next couple of business days. So stay tuned.
I see another question here. So is taking 2 courses over the 10-week session the equivalent of a full course load? And do we recommend only 1 course for the 10-week session specifically?
Great question. I'll be honest, the 10-week session is new for us. And so I don't know if the official policies have been set yet for max credit hour limits looking at the 10-week summer session. The way it's been defined historically is the max is 8 credit hours per session. I don't know if we've really fleshed out what that will look like. I will put hold on. I'm going to update my screening to include our office's email address. So please feel free to follow up with our office, and I might have an answer at a later date. Unfortunately, I don't have one now.
Thank you, Shelly. Do you anticipate that any more courses will be added to summer offerings?
It is possible, but it is not probable at this point. Our faculty tend to plan almost 2 semesters ahead for what's coming up next, if that makes sense. So instructors have been planning for the summer since the fall. So it is possible there could be some more offerings added, but it's not likely at this point.
Is there an add drop period for summer courses?
Yes, and typically the drop is by the second day of classes. So they try to keep it tight, right? If you think about this in comparison to a normal semester where we give students almost 2 weeks for the add drop period, that's almost like 2 days and a typical 5-week summer session course. So that's why we only give them until the second day to drop the class. But yes, there is an add drop period. Again, it's just much shorter because of the condensed time frame.
I have a question here. Tracy wants to know if there are fees in addition to tuition cost per credit hour for summer sessions. And I'm going to post a link in the chat to the full description of what summer 2021 tuition looks like, which includes some information about additional fees. So it looks to me as if there's a one-time registration fee of $25 and a one-time comprehensive fee of $55. And beyond that, there are some specific course-related fees that might pop up. But you can look at that website that I just posted there in the chat, and it'll give you that full list of applicable fees. It's a great question. Can a freshman take a 300 call in the summer?
Yes. Yes, a first-year student can most definitely take a call 300 in the summer. I think the main thing to keep in mind is, again, kind of knowing themselves and how they've been working through this process. If they have been taking remote courses, do they do better with asynchronous or synchronous? Or if there's time zone issues, right, is synchronous going to work for you? So the things we would normally recommend for students kind of in our pandemic operations model, just kind of keep those things in mind.
How often do classes typically meet in a summer session?
That's a good question. Here, let me pull up. I'm going to pull up one as an example. So I happened to be looking earlier this evening at the Call 300 options available for this summer. And so one of them is a government course, and they meet Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from 10:10 to 12. So that's one example. There's another one, again, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, from 12:30 to 6:20. So it does vary a little bit depending on if they're meeting synchronous versus asynchronous, and then also if it's in the summer session 1, summer session 2, or the summer session 3 that goes over 10 weeks, it's going to look a little different.
Okay, random, not summer related question, but when do students register for the fall?
Great question. And I'm pulling up my calendar because I want to make sure I get the dates right, because there's so many dates floating around in my head. So the priority registration based off of social class starts the week of April 12th. So the week of April 12th is when social class priority registration begins. And I will drop in the chat the fall registration breakdown from the registrar's office website.
One question is, will the classes be entirely completed by the end of each session, like all tests, assignments turned in by the time session 1 wraps up, for example?
Yes, that is the intention, is that the student will have completed the whole, all of the coursework by the end of the session.
Fantastic. Do summer courses typically fill up quickly?
Great question. Historically, the answer has been no. But I think as with everything else that we're adjusting to, I don't know if that will still hold true for this summer or not.
Yeah, this is
Just
a
being
little
honest,
different.
yeah.
There's been some anticipation for summer, so this one might be a little bit of an anomaly
Right.
in terms of how many students are interested in taking summer courses. Okay, we've got lots of really good questions, so I'm just filtering through here to see which ones we've already answered and which ones we haven't gotten to yet. So if a student signs up for 2 hard science courses, for example, and it turns out to be too much, too quick, what are their options for maybe backtracking out of one of those courses in terms of summer withdrawal and things of that
Yes.
nature?
Yes, so that would be an option for a student to withdraw from the class, or students also have the option, if they're past the withdrawal deadline, to also petition the Committee on Academic Status for a late withdrawal. So that is an option for students if they feel like they're getting stuck, to look at the withdrawal options. Something I might recommend doing in advance is reaching out to the faculty member to see if they have a copy of their syllabus ready, or when they do, if they can go ahead and share it. Maybe do a little planning to see exactly what the course load looks like, what feels feasible. The tutor zone is open in the summer, so that is an option for folks too, to take advantage of the tutor zone.
Fantastic. We actually did have a question of are
good.
tutors available during the summer? Yes,
They are.
They are. Okay. My student is waiting to hear from a third-party study abroad. Can she enroll in summer school on chance that the study abroad is canceled, but withdraw without penalty if the study abroad does not go through?
From an academic advising standpoint, yes. I can't speak to necessarily the bursar's office and how they function in terms of bill due dates. So that piece of the puzzle, I don't know.
Yeah, that would be a great question to reach out to the bursar's office and figure out when those deadlines would be. Okay. My daughter is currently a full-time student at William & Mary, and my son attends a nearby 4-year college. Both really want to take courses during the summer, but my son wants to take a few courses as a visiting non-degree seeking student at William & Mary. Is this possible? And if so,
Yes.
Who is the contact?
Yes, and give me 1 second and I can drop that in the chat.
I also see a question here. Can you tell us more about the Washington, D.C. courses? So registration for DC courses also start on the 22nd, but they are doing an information session on March 24th from 5:30 to 6:30. I'm going to post a link in the chat here to information about the DC summer sessions because it lists what courses are going to be offered in the summer sessions. And so that's a great place to go. And you can register for the upcoming information session to learn more about those specific courses. This is a really great question. How is it handled if a fall 2021 course requires prerequisites that they are taking this summer? Will that need some sort of override to register for those fall 2021 classes?
That is a really good question. So hold on. This just came up the other day in my office, and somebody reached out to the registrar's office to double check. Yes, so if a student signs up for a summer 2021 prereq course, and then 2 weeks later signs up for their fall course, the next course in the sequence, our system assumes that there will be a successful completion of the summer course, and then will allow them to register for the fall course. So that's actually a really good question.
I have two questions here. If the classes fill up quickly, will the university consider adding additional sections?
Potentially. I think it all depends on which courses they are, or if there's capacity to add um, to add seats, if you will. My hunch is we would be more likely to work in overrides as opposed to adding more sections.
Will professors have summer office hours for students if needed?
Yes. Yes. Every instructor, when they teach a course, has office hours built into to the instruction of that course and into their syllabus.
In a typical 5-week class, how many hours should a student be expected to spend if they maybe also want to work? So thinking about how much time does this summer session actually take up?
Sure. That's a really good question. So if we kind of go back to the example of if they are taking a remote synchronous class, right? And so they're meeting in class together for roughly 2 hours a day. And so if you think about just the class time being 2 hours a day, and then probably building on maybe 2 hours of work time after the 2 hours of class time, we typically tell students to spend anywhere from 4 to 5 hours a day on those classes. Because again, we're really squeezing up the timeline compared to if they took it in the fall or spring semester. Again, every student's different and how they process and what the course is, but in general, I would have students expect to spend 4 to 5 hours per day on their classwork.
So I'm seeing some questions about whether the DC summer sessions will also be virtual. From what I can tell, they are mostly online coursework. Their website does mention 5 consecutive evening sessions in DC. Now, I don't know if that has changed since our announcement today. So I would encourage you to reach out via email to ask those questions. And I posted their email in the chat because that 5 consecutive evening sessions piece may have changed a little bit. So I would recommend reaching out to get some clarification there, but it does appear that most of the courses in the summer session in DC are going to be online. So when looking at the course list, how do you know what course is in summer session 1, summer session 2, or the 10-week summer session?
So when you're in open course list, everything's in a column, and that first column is titled CRN, and then you'll see these 5-digit codes. If you click on those 5-digit codes, it'll give you a pop-up window that will show you the course dates. And so then there you can tell if it's summer session 1, summer session 2, or the whole 10 weeks.
Fantastic. I'm just reading through our questions here. Is the open course list that is currently linked through the registrar page up to date? Are all of those courses still available after accounting for the newly announced in-person limitations?
Yes. So what's on course list is accurate. As of now, like I mentioned earlier, there might still need to be some shifts. If there were listings of face-to-face course offerings, those obviously need to be changed now. But the listing is accurate.
Fantastic. My daughter needs to take a science in session 1 and a follow-up science in session 2. Sounds like the session 1 is a prereq for class in session 2. Can she sign up for both classes at the same time?
She should be able to. If she does encounter any issues with that, she can reach out to the registrar's office and they can work their magic on the back end.
Will a recording of this session be posted? 100%. It is being recorded and it will be posted live. Shelly and I actually co-host the Decipher podcast along with Lauren Garrett, who's the director of student transition engagement programs. And we're thinking about turning the audio from the session into a podcast. So if that's more of your modality, it might be available both ways, but it will definitely be posted to our webinar website and also our YouTube channel for you to review later. Is it typical that remote asynchronous courses have at least one synchronous session, or are they primarily asynchronous?
They are primarily asynchronous. The intention is that the student can successfully complete the course asynchronously. There could be instructors that might offer, like an optional like meet and greet with the instructor. Obviously, office hours are going to be synchronous. But with a remote asynchronous course, the intention is that the student can successfully complete the course asynchronously.
Someone missed the first few minutes of our discussion and wants to know if there's really no possibility of in-person classes, even with proof of vaccination. And I am pretty confident in that there will be no possibility of in-person classes aside from these very limited graduate and professional programs that may be doing some in-person offerings. If you want to learn more information about that, I recommend going to the Path Forward website and looking specifically under students and families. The summer session bullet will give you kind of an understanding of how decisions were made about the summer session. You can also refer to the email that I forwarded to all families earlier this afternoon, which outlines kind of how the decision was made not to do any in-person summer courses. A question just came through. Any sense of what fall will look like in terms of in-person remote course offerings? I will say the brief preview that we got in our email today at the very end, if you may have missed it, is the first that we've really heard about some fall direction. It's sounding like we're hopeful to be as in-person as possible, as is safe and with health and safety guidelines allow. But I will say that as information becomes available, we will continue to share. But I would expect that over the next few weeks, we'll learn some more information about what fall will look like. But it seems like we're leaning towards as in person as we're able to be.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, part of this, like Heather mentioned earlier, we just got the notification today about summer. And I'm sure you all understand this as well. Now that the decision about summer has been made, now our leadership has kind of the time and capability to take a more in-depth look at fall and start, making decisions and sharing that with us. Again, kind of keeping in mind the public health protocols that we need to follow.
Okay. So if a student deferred their first semester and was hoping that the summer session would make up his missing semester, is that possible to make up an entire semester in the summer, or is that kind of not possible, I would say?
It's a tricky question. I think, again, the intention with how our summer sessions have been constructed is for students to pick up a class or two. Now, students can take more, but that's not really the way summer session courses have been designed. So it's a very individual, the question requires a very individualized answer in terms of knowing more about the student and courses that they need and things like that. So my best recommendation would be to either have your student meet with their faculty advisor, or again, students are always welcome to meet with the professional advisors in our office. And we're more than happy to work with them. And I can even put a link to our office in the chat, and students can schedule appointments online to meet with us. So that could be another option too. Again, we would just really want to take a close look at what they have so far and kind of where their progress is going before making any recommendations. So yes, students can take, 8 credits, both summer session 1, summer session 2. it's a question of if they'll be successful, and that's where we would want to talk to the student to see if that would be a smart choice for them.
I got a question. When is tuition due for summer classes? And so I am going to post that in the chat one more time. I have lots of tabs open on the William and Mary website. What is posted online for tuition deadlines is June 1st, July 1st, and August 1st, 2021. For specific questions about that, I would definitely contact the bursar's office. Okay. Freshman parent here. In non-COVID years, do summer sessions offer on-campus housing?
Yes. Yes. Typically, there are options for students to live on campus during the summer.
And I will say, for some context in terms of one of the reasons why housing is not available this summer, we closed very quickly in spring 2020, and the halls remained closed over the summer 2020. And so some of our typical maintenance tasks, facilities work, cleaning, things of that nature were not attended to as they truly needed to be in summer 2020. And so we are closing the halls so that some of that work can be done and facilities can be refreshed and ready for students in the fall. So that's one of the reasons, and that's outlined in that email communication we received today. Okay, the Jumpstart data science program is slated for 15 credits over the summer. That now seems intense for all online classes. It's a great opportunity, but I'm a bit concerned about online burnout. Any thoughts on how this may be addressed?
That's a great question. And I think a real concern too, right? Heather and I were even talking before this webinar started, how I think having done so much of this Zoom work over the past year, folks are really zoomed out. And I know it's hard for our students as well, and as our instructors also. So yes, it's a very real concern. I will say that there have been conversations kind of happening in different spots around campus, working on how to address this and look at different options to make this more feasible for students. One of the big advantages to the Data Science Jumpstart program is that it has kind of really close faculty connections built into the program. And so there are opportunities for students to work really closely with those instructors and have those conversations. So I think all that to say is there's support built into that program. And also this understanding that this Zoom fatigue is universal as well. So in some ways, I think that eases some of the pain around all of this, because we're all trying to figure out different ways to manage this for ourselves and for our students that we work with as well. So definitely something to keep an eye on and something to ask questions about for students that are interested in that as they go through that program, but also being aware that this is on our minds as well, how to best support students as we are continuing to work in this Zoom modality.
For sure. So I do see a question here. Maybe you haven't received the email that I'm talking about. If that's the case, and you don't receive emails from me on a regular basis, you should probably email me at heather@wm.edu, and I'll put that in the chat as well. And I can check and see if I need to get you added to one of our listservs if you haven't already been receiving emails from me. And I do have a question here about any plans for vaccination events on campus before the spring semester ends. I would say that any updates about vaccinations are going to come from the email that I send to you weekly from Amy Sebring. She's the director of our COVID-19 team, and she will be including any vaccination updates in her weekly updates email. You can also find all of those weekly updates online, and I'm going to find the link to that now so that you can kind of see all of the updates since the year began, and you can read all of those updates if you are not receiving emails from me. Okay, and I have 2 fall-related questions pending. It's probably too early to ask this question, says the asker, but would you anticipate that if all fall classes were in person, that there may potentially still be options for remote if a student is ill or for some reason can't come to class? And while I don't know the answer to this question, I would guess yes. I think there are a lot of lessons we've learned in the last year about the ways that students can still engage in their coursework. I can't promise that that's going to be true or that we won't have any remote offerings. That's still too early to tell in terms of what fall is exactly going to look like. But I would say that might be something that we keep post-pandemic. Shelly, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's, again, obviously, like Heather said, there's been no official announcements or official decisions have been made around this. But I've been hearing lots of conversations, as I'm sure you all have been hearing in your spheres, about not so much a return to normal, but what does our new normal look like when it is safe for us to gather together again? What will that look like, and what will we construct, and what are things that we do want to keep? And so I think that's something that, again, no decisions have been made around this, but there are conversations around what does instructional modality look like in the fall, even if we are, if we are able to safely gather again. So I wish I knew the answer. But all I can say is those conversations are happening, and I'm hopeful that we can find solutions that work to support our students wherever they are.
This will be our last question. If you do have any other questions that we didn't have time for, please email us at families@wm.edu or myself, Heather@wm.edu. Happy to answer any questions that you still have as we're able to do so. The last question is there a plan for vaccines to be required for students in the fall? Again, not entirely sure right now because the COVID-19 vaccines are being distributed under an emergency use authorization from the FDA. They are not currently required by any faculty, staff, or students. However, when the vaccines are approved beyond emergency use, it may be required of students. If there are requirements that are put in place, we will communicate those to students and families when those decisions are made. But as of right now, they are not. But that wraps us up. We got through a lot of questions, a lot of answers. This was recorded. It will be posted online, both in podcast and YouTube video form. If you do have further questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Like we mentioned earlier, we learned the same time that you did about what summer was going to look like. So there was kind of a question of whether or not we could even chat with you this evening. So we're excited that we learned a little bit more. And if you do have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you again, Shelly, and thank you, families, for joining us this evening.
Yeah, thanks, Heather.